Hi everyone. So today, Mum and I wanted to talk a little bit about mealtimes and just kind of share our reflections on what it was like because it can be quite a traumatic time in the day for I mean it may be for you or it may be for those that you know. But certainly from our perspective, we have um, a lot of perhaps not so fond memories from those times. And I think looking back, there are certainly things that we can see now with hindsight, and perhaps things that we might have done differently. Obviously, it's so difficult caught up in that situation, and it is a situation that is required, and there are the kind of restrictions that are put on by the medical team. That's certainly what I found from my experience, that there were kind of certain number of calories that had to be added on each week, and we had to follow the meal plan very strictly. So we just wanted to have a bit of a conversation about our experience and just kind of see where it goes, and hopefully it might be of some use to you, and hopefully you might be able to relate to it. So Mum, I just wonder whether from your perspective you could kind of share as a carer what it was like, and maybe we can just have a bit of discussion around that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's so funny. Just even when you were talking about it, we don't have many fond memories of that time, and that's so true because eating food has always been such an important part of my life. My growing up was very much centered around food and cooking and enjoying being together as an extended family and all of that. So it was just part of life for me, and it was like that before you got ill as well. So very much like that. And I taught you all to cook, and Dan, who was still only little at the time, was already interested in food and cooking. And yet here we were in a battleground around one of the things I loved the most. And that was really, really tough because there was part of me that was trying to get my head around it as to, well, where do we go from here? What do we do? And trying to understand what it was like for you when you stood over me as we literally had the weighing scales out to measure out Rice Krispies, for example. And me trying to get into your head as well as being in my own head, which was, for goodness sake, we're talking about a grain of rice here, you know, and your constant vigilance of not trusting me. So you had to have eagle eyes on me all the time when I was cooking because you didn't want me slipping in any extra calories in any way, adding more butter or cream or I don't know, whatever it might have been. And I found that really, really hard. And there were times that I just wanted to scream and shout. But I was doing my very best to try and understand what it was like from your perspective, and that was really tough. And then, so there was that side of it, but then the other side was the dining room table where we ate. We had a kind of extended part of the kitchen was our little breakfast room, and the five of us had our places. And I was thinking about this earlier when we decided we wanted to record a video on this. And I was just thinking of the different faces that were looking at me and the different eyes that were looking at me or not looking at me with, one person, and there is no judgment here at all, but there was like Dan with big eyes just pleading, looking at me like, I don't understand what's going on. Help me, mummy. There was your steely-eyed stare, either at your plate or at anybody else who dared look at you. One of those where we always used to say that you had a drop-dead look, and it was kind of like that. Ollie, I remember his eyes were down a lot of the time, and that was just heartbreaking to see. And then Dad was dealing with it in a different way, which was kind of trying to have conversation and pretend everything was okay, and all of that. And as I say, there's no judgment in any of that. It's just how we were all dealing with it in our own way. And me scanning everybody because everybody was looking at me pleadingly in some way. And I've only really kind of remembered that now. And it's like, that was so tough.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because like that's the first time I've ever heard you say that. And this whole idea of separate realities that we talk about a lot, which basically, for those watching, like what we mean by that is that we're all living from our own perspective. We only ever see life through our own eyes, and that's influenced by so many things that are kind of our own filters. It's from previous experiences, it's from our values and all this kind of stuff. But it all kind of goes through the filter of what's going on in our head. And so the five of us being around that table, we all had a completely different experience of that, even though the same physical thing is happening, the same event is taking place. And I think that's a really interesting thing to consider in hindsight, because I mean, I guess maybe a question for you would be if you had maybe been aware of that, or be kind of known that consciously, that yes, this was a really tough situation, but everyone's reality looks real to them. So, and everyone's doing the best they can with that version of reality. So Dan was doing the best he could. I was doing the best he could. Everyone around that table was doing the best they could, given what was going on in their heads and what looked real to them at the time. So I wonder whether you maybe have any, I don't know, any reflections on that, and whether that would have changed anything, or because I guess for me, my initial thoughts is that it kind of sort of lets you off the hook a bit, because if we all know that we're all doing the best we can and that everyone else is also doing the best they can, then actually that all that resentment around, I really wish that person would just do this, or why is that person responding the way they are or aren't, but also that kind of self-forgiveness almost, of that, yes, I am actually doing the best I can in this situation with what's going on in my head.
Yeah, that's so true. And what comes up for me when you were saying that was, you see, at the time, there was, for me, I just felt I was supporting everybody. So I was there trying to fix everybody's feelings, having to not make Dan feel the way he was feeling with those big starey eyes coming at me, wanting to make your life as easy as possible, which, as we've spoken about, probably meant me becoming a bit complicit with the eating disorder at the time, and me dealing with Dan, with Ollie, and you can imagine somebody's looking down as they're eating, feeling so uncomfortable, and it was like I felt that as well. And then with Dad, and as we know, we've spoken about this, that our relationship was kind of hitting the rocks at the time. So there was lots of thinking I had around that as well. I didn't give my thoughts a second thought. I didn't have room for that, about how I was feeling in that, because there was me trying to spin all the plates, prop everybody up. And of course, now what I know is that I didn't have to do that. That, as you said, everybody was doing the best they can. And if I knew that underneath all of that noisy thinking that they had going on, that they were okay, I didn't need to fix anybody. I didn't need to go in and support and love, but listen, just to listen to what was going on, rather than thinking I had to fix it.
or could fix it.
Or could fix it, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, it's so interesting that idea of spinning plates, because what comes to mind is that if that's what it looked like, but actually it's almost like someone, like you don't realize that actually those plates are being kind of, they're being like suspended from the ceiling, so actually you don't need to hold them at all.
and they weren't mine to spin anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the thing, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder also that what you mentioned at the start about preparing food as well, because I remember that. I mean, I've mentioned this a few times that my memory is quite patchy from that time, because I think that in itself was a sign that I was just so caught up in my own world that I wasn't really paying attention to what was going on around me. But I do remember vividly hovering over you while you were cooking meals and weighing out my cereal and like whatever you were doing in the kitchen, because I didn't trust you. I didn't trust you at all. And but at the same time, when I would prepare my own food, I would be cutting corners, and I wasn't being truthful. So it was an absolute necessity that you did that.
Yeah.
But it was really hard because I needed to be in control. And when you were in control, that was really, really hard, because it was kind of putting my destiny in your hands, even if it was a grain of rice. That was a big deal to me.
Yeah.
And again, like that was my reality at the time. It doesn't make sense to me anymore. But that was, I think that was those were kind of the pinch points in the day, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely were the pinch points, and dreading them as well. But also the food shopping. That was a nightmare. And I can't even remember. Again, my memory is a bit patchy. Then we were talking quite a few years ago now. But whether you came to the supermarket with me, I'm not sure. I think I just knew your, what are seen as safe foods or safe brands or whatever. But what was it like? I mean, and if you have memory of this, what was it like? That complete distrust. So two things going on, I guess, because before all of this, we had such an amazing relationship. My little girl, and then it got to a point where I was the enemy. What was that like for you around food preparation time or meal time, where you saw maybe mummy, but you also saw the prison guard or the police, whatever?
It was really, really hard. And I think there was, and I've spoken about this before, but there was throughout that whole time when I had the eating disorder, there was a lot of kind of toing and froing between how I kind of what our relationship looked like. I think when it was when I was connecting with you, it was mum and daughter. It was kind of connecting on that level that we did before, when we had that good relationship. But when it was the kind of the eating disorder, trying to connect or not connect with you, and particularly like if you were caught up in your head as well, instead of, without sounding kind of too cringy, instead of like heart to heart, it was kind of mind to mind. Both these two kind of foggy minds trying to like battle it out, which obviously was pretty explosive and didn't really go anywhere. And that's when we argued, and there would be slamming doors, but it never reached a conclusion because it was going around in circles. And I think a lot of our arguments sounded quite similar.
Yeah.
But I think in that situation specifically, like when I had to accept, I don't think I did accept, but I kind of had to except that you had to take some control, and that there was a line. It was hugely frustrating. It was kind of physically painful as well. Yeah, it wasn't nice. It wasn't nice. And I'm just kind of thinking, I mean, I haven't really thought about this before now, but what I would do differently, or how I would see that situation differently. I think what we talk about around, like, it's okay to feel uncomfortable would have been a huge thing.
Yeah.
Because it's not about changing the situation, because that situation needed to happen. You needed, for that period of time, you needed to weigh out my food, because otherwise I wouldn't eat. That was a necessity. So I think, but if I'm looking at, I guess, how maybe I would approach this, I mean, this is all in hindsight, so it's easy for me to say this now, and obviously when you're caught up in that situation, it is so difficult to see the wood from the trees. But I think knowing that it was okay to feel the way I was feeling, and not, I guess, not resist so much.
It's a bit like when we're in physical pain. The more we kind of, say you've fallen over and really hurt yourself. Thinking back when you were little and you'd have a tumble and you'd get a bloody knee or something like that, and you'd look at it and it'd be, the tears would start, and then you'd kind of get caught up in that. It's almost like if we try and fight that, then it kind of makes it worse rather than accepting it, or even having a really bad stomach ache, The more we tense up against a really sore stomach, the tighter and the worse it feels, rather than the kind of, as we've said, the acceptance of it or the acknowledgement of it. This feels really uncomfortable. I feel horrible right now, and I'm still okay.
Yeah. And I think also the whole thing around trust, which was such a big thing, because I think to some degree I had kind of made my peace with, on some level, with the fact that I did have to eat and you did have to weigh out my food. But I think maybe, I don't know, I don't know if we even had conversations about trust, and actually had like a sit down and said to each other, look, this is a shit situation, but we both know that this has to happen. We need to be able to trust each other. I don't remember having that conversation, but I feel like, again, with hindsight, that maybe that would have been helpful.
Yeah, yes. And what's interesting is I can imagine having that trust conversation with you, Beatrice, but not with the eating disorder, because that's gonna, yeah, of course, you can trust me, I won't, and it's going behind, behind your back kind of thing. And I can see that it was, I knew that I was trustworthy. I knew that I wasn't going to try and go behind your back and put calories in and do stuff like that. I knew that, but you didn't. Or rather, I suspect you did, but the eating disorder didn't.
And I think it's getting so tangled up in the commentary that was going on in my head at the same time as me hovering over you.
Yeah.
Because actually I wasn't just dealing with neither of us were just dealing with the situation that was in front of us. We were dealing with that plus whatever was going on in our heads. And plus, I imagine for you, you also trying to figure out what's going on in my head as well as yours.
Yeah.
So actually trying to have any kind of clarity, I think was near impossible, or being able to approach that situation with a kind of a calm mind that might have made it easier. Again, not changing the situation, but I guess going back to the whole snow globe thing, that if we're both going into that situation both with kind of shaken up snow globes in our head, then it's going to make it a lot more challenging than if we went into it with more settled ones.
And one of the things that, so I was up in Leeds, Halifax rather, with Mary, our friend Mary, Franklin Smith, and helping her with a day for carers. And we kind of ran through a whole dining room setup thing, mealtime. And one of the things that really stood out for me, that goodness, I wish I'd had this kind of up my sleeve when you were ill, was this whole idea of listening to what's really being said. So, you know, for example, if you were fighting and I can't eat this, and, you know, why are you making me do this, or whatever it was, it's actually not responding to that, because as you've said, that's the kind of up there, the head-to-head thing going on. But it's actually thinking, what's B really saying? What's she really trying to communicate? And it's going to be something along the lines of, I'm scared, or I'm frightened, or I'm tired, or I don't know what to do. And if we can learn to answer that question or that statement, then that's going to really diffuse something. To speak in response to what's really going on.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of seeing behind the mask of
Yeah.
the eating disorder,
Yeah.
and speaking to the kind of the health and the well-being that's behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I wonder, I'm just kind of imagining what impact that would have had on me as well, and also the other people who are around the table.
Mm-hmm. You know, for me, so instead of, you know, you've got to eat it, it's on your meal plan, being the response, what if the response had been, I know this is really tough for you right now, you know, and going from that place rather than the confrontational place. And of course, sometimes that's going to be a lot easier to do than at other times. But if that can be our aim, is to speak to what's really being said, to listen to what's, as you said, going on behind the mask, then that gives us a better chance to build trust as well, and to, you know, coming from that place of love, rather than, because as we know, you and I both know, eating disorders thrive on conflict. That's its, excuse the analogy, but that's its bread and butter. It really is. Confrontation, that's what it wants, because it's going to win every time, because it's got more staying power. So we just need to not fan that, not get in there.
And that can be, again, it's the easier said than done.
Absolutely.
Because when someone's picking a fight with you, your automatic response, whoever's starting it, your automatic response is going to be to defend yourself and to fight back.
Yeah.
And actually, it takes a huge amount of kind of power and will and energy to actually resist that.
Yeah. And that's it. You know, sometimes that means walking out of the room.
Yeah.
or not answering, or just not engaging in whatever way makes sense.
And I think it's starting to notice when that's actually happening. So when it's foggy mind speaking to or arguing with foggy mind.
Yeah.
And actually, I guess, thinking how helpful is this conversation? And obviously it's not always possible to walk out the room if you're in the middle of cooking dinner or on meal times. Yeah. So I hope this has been vaguely helpful. As you can tell, this is the first time we've talked about this. But we'd love to hear your thoughts, whether you have found it helpful, whether you can relate, and yeah, do check out our other videos. We're posting a new video every week, and make sure you hit subscribe. And we'll see you soon.